direction on progressing local board reorganisation for the 2028 elections. I think there's some staff coming forward for that. Staff had looked at this after workshopping with us and the local boards and come to the conclusion there isn't really a case to do a reorganisation this term in order to spend money on it. So thank you to Carol and Oliver. They don't look like Carol and Oliver to me, but still, for their work on this, and I'll hand over to them to talk to their recommendation. I think filling up the buses with diesel is probably a little bit more important for a spend this year than talking about a local board re-election, but there you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this report provides feedback from local boards on whether or not we should go ahead with the local board reorganisation. Following December's GB resolution, boards were asked to provide feedback on matters, issues or opportunities that a reorganisation could address, whether the board supported going ahead, and if yes, whether that should be led by the Local Government Commission or carried out in-house. The feedback we received did not show strong support for reorganisation, but that if we were to go ahead, the preference was to ask the LGC to lead this. Some boards identified areas that would benefit from being investigated, generally areas of high growth, where some consideration is needed on where communities of interest best lie, for example, Milldale or Drury. Other boards thought it was better to work through other changes first that are already being considered, such as fairer funding and transport reform. Many boards wanted to ensure that when a review does take place, it looks at both the GB representation as well as the local board reorganisation. There were also a few matters that raised that would be managed through a representation review instead. Advice from the LGC is that the reorganisation should take place prior to a representation review to ensure alignment of wards and boards where possible. So overall, staff did not feel there was enough support from boards to go ahead this term, but feel that this should go ahead as per the Local Government Commission recommendation prior to our next representation review, which is due to take place next term. Thank you.
I don't have any questions about this one. Oh, Councillor Gillen.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. The first one is that we need to legally do a representation review in the next 6 years since the last one. So will you be putting forward as part of the LTP planning a budget in there to ensure that we do actually front foot it?
Yeah, yes, we can do that. Yeah.
Thank you. My second question is that you've said that there doesn't seem to be a support from the local boards to progress with this. However, my reading of their feedback in the report is that actually a majority do want to do it. They just don't want to review local boards in isolation. They actually want a wider review of the governing body and other aspects of council, much of which would actually be included if we were to do a reorganisation and a representation review. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct. The board also raised further governance issues relating to the shared governance model, decision-making, allocation, resourcing and representation. However, these concerns sit outside the statutory scope of a local board reorganisation under the Local Government Act Schedule 3A.
But they fall under the representation review?
Sorry?
They would fall under a representation review?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to clarify, more boards did not support going ahead with the reorganisation this term based on the feedback, but there were quite a few who did talk about that wider scope, and some of those were clear that it should be both. So there's, I'd say, in balance, less supported going ahead this term than did. Yeah.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yes, I just want to pursue that notion a little further. Point 8, 4 boards support a local board reorganisation, 14 call for a wider scope governance review that includes the governing body and local boards. So there obviously is a bit of a groundswell for doing something, and I guess I'm not quite sure what form the feedback took, but when I look at the hibiscus and bays one that you've included here, they're quite specific, and I'd imagine that would be the tenor of some of the rest of them. So I guess that section 3A, Schedule 3A, it does provide quite a bit of scope, doesn't it, as articulated here?
Yes, part of it. So Schedule 3A provides opportunity to amalgamate, for example, amalgamate local boards or to do any major boundary adjustments.
Yeah, so establishing, abolishing, amalgamating boards. I guess to cut to the chase, and some of the councillors have been around for a little while, you know, be aware of the Royal Commission recommendation back in 2009, which had quite a lot of support around Auckland, and they came up with a very specific recommendation, which, you know, looking in retrospect, I think would have worked a lot better, but leave that aside. What ability is there to come up with a version of that of our own volition? So, for instance, and I'm looking at 3A here, basically establishing, to an extent abolishing and amalgamating. We're looking to do that where you come up with a version of their, and just for argument's sake, it could be anything, but say 6 or 7 local councils that amalgamate the local boards into that that format that the Royal Commission were keen to proceed with. Does 3A allow that type of reorganisation?
So just to be clear, the reorganisation approach that we can do under 3A can look at those boards, can look at the size of the boards, can look at how we kind of set them up based around communities of interest. If we want to reflect back to the feedback we got from local boards through this engagement, the questions were more around things like, how does the allocation of decision making work? How does the budget management work? How does the shared governance model work in general? That can't be considered under a local board reorganisation. So is it that we want to look at a structural issue, or do we want to look at this at a governance level? We were aware that there's a lot going on in this space around the governance framework review. So there are things happening already around fairer funding, trying to look at the support that has been provided to local boards, but that can't be dealt with under the mechanism of the Schedule 3A. That's only the structural matters around where the board boundaries would be.
So I guess in a pragmatic terms then, so you couldn't just say, for instance, amalgamate all the northern boards and make them, instead of call them a local board, call them a local council? I mean, it's semantics. So you're saying you couldn't do that under this reorganisation?
We could change them into one large local board under this mechanism, but it doesn't necessarily change the decision-making allocation and how the shared governance model is applied. That's something that needs to be dealt with separately.
Okay, so even though we're looking to increase local boards' decision-making, we say we're looking to give them more delegations, so you're saying that would have to occur outside of this process. So, but the two could happen in conjunction, couldn't they? Yeah. Okay, I'll speak to this, Mr. Mayor, when at the right time. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I don't have any other questions. So you guys retire, please, and we'll have a debate about this if anyone wants to debate it. We've been flogged to death as far as I'm concerned. And I'm glad it died. Councillor Foley, you wish to say something?
Kia ora. Thanks, Chair, and thanks, team, for all of the work. I'm going to be supporting the recommendation not to go ahead with the reorganisation, but I just did want to highlight some of the feedback that we got from our local boards in South Auckland, and specifically from our 2 local boards in the Manukau ward. And they were against the reorganisation, but they did want to highlight that there are things of more pressing priority for us as a governing body, as a council, and as a city. In particular, they wanted us to use our priorities for and our resourcing to restore electoral integrity, to restore public confidence in local government, but also in in the electoral system, because that's taken a bit of a hit in South Auckland with the by-election happening, for example. Also addressing the local board funding shortfalls and the pressure that local boards are feeling out there to look at their programs line by line in order to meet those shortfalls. And of course, frontline services. There's an ask in there from the 2 local boards to put more of our resourcing towards that. And they say that's a better use of the money that would have gone towards this reorganisation. And just to end off, I think the Mangere o Tahu local board said, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Kia ora. Thank you.
Councillor Watson, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I think this is a little bit of a missed opportunity here, really, because my reading of the feedback here is that probably the local boards lacked a bit of direction in their feedback, but obviously, you know, there are concerns there for supported the reorganisation and looking to widen the scope, and that comes off the back of some things that have been around for a long while, and which basically go to the structure and the organisation of local boards as they stand at the moment. So we just had an election where there was a 29% turnout. So there's things going on to address that I think we all know in our heart of hearts aren't going to result in too much of a dramatic change. But one of the consistent threads, in my view, certainly in the area I represent, but across Auckland as a whole, is a kind of lack of identity with the area people are in and are represented for, and many people are still caught in the mindset of the legacy councils as far as the areas, and there's a lot of geographic logic and historical logic to that. So we're kind of just soldiering on, despite the fact the structure, despite some of the tinkering with it, it hasn't fundamentally changed. We had a lot of very harsh criticism at the time that came out, and that criticism proven to be correct. And over the passage of time, Professor Shirley was a professor of public policy at AUT University, and he referred to the current organisation as being a kind of corporatised one, and that would not gain the trust of ratepayers. And in referring to the local boards, he said the current prescriptions for these boards and the minimal allocation of support services make it clear that the boards will be largely irrelevant in decision making. Perhaps a little bit harsh, but I think a version of that has developed over the years for any number of reasons. So I guess I'm not just happy with soldiering on when you combine that with some of our own monitoring, the Citizen Insights monitoring report that has been changed a little bit in recent years, but basically, if you look at the rolling quarter from 2022 to 2025, you have public satisfaction with Auckland Council's performance around about 18%, 18, 19, 18. And I think, despite the best efforts of everyone, a large part of that is basically to the structure that doesn't work. It hasn't captured Aucklanders. There has been no proper review of it, so we've had a CCO review, we're dismantling Auckland Transport, Panuku's bit the dust, but the fundamental structure remains intact. And I think it could be better. It was imposed on Auckland, so Auckland had no say in it at the time. There's been no proper review, independent review of it, yet we somehow think that a number of these disturbing democratic trends in terms of representation, interest, engagement of our communities is clearly not working. In fact, it's on a downward trajectory despite everything. So in instances like this, you either just sort of tick the box and soldier on, confine yourself to a representation review that changes around, a little bit of this ward or a little bit of that ward, but the fundamental structure is there. It's not being challenged. I think we're losing an opportunity here to signal that there could be a reorganisation. And when I look at it, and certainly the feedback, and part of the reason I'm speaking out is because this has become a very strong feedback I've got from the local boards that are in my area in terms of addressing the structure, and what they would like to put up is something, and without getting specific, more akin to the Royal Commission, which in essence would reduce the numbers of elected people by half, but would give the half that are in far more power and far more ability to represent their local communities, or their local councils as they're called. So I guess the question I put up, a rhetorical one, I'm speaking to myself as usual, is, well, if not now, when? When then do we actually address this fundamental structural issue that I think has a large part to do with a number of the challenges we face, because you just kick the can down the road? Who's going to do it? It's none of the governments. The successive government's been in. They haven't touched it with the 10-foot barge pole. They're just leaving Auckland to it. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, that's what I'm saying, is that we kind of forego that opportunity in this. I think Auckland could be a lot better. And it could be a lot better through some version of what the Royal Commission actually recommended. And I think it's up to us to do it, because these other people in Wellington aren't going to do it. So I won't be supporting it, because basically it's not addressing that fundamental issue, and that the local boards in their own way have hinted is what really is of interest to them. We haven't really dug a bit deeper on that, and I don't think that's going to result in better outcomes for Auckland in the years and decades to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Gillen, please.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I actually concur with a lot of what Councillor Watson has said today. Look, ladies and gentlemen, as you'll be aware, what is before us is a reorganisation review and representation review, and the reason is due to the convoluted way the two pieces of legislation intertwine and overlap, and the whole thing actually needs a legislation overhaul. What we were proposing was a reorganisation review followed by a representation review, which is the order that the Local Government Commission recommended. Last time we looked at this, the governing body unfortunately kneecapped the process by only doing a representation review, which made it difficult to respond to boundary changes in both wards and local boards when they're supposed to be as in sync as possible. Now, to kick it off this time, late last year, we asked local boards, we requested that local boards be asked what issues, if any, they would like included in the reorganisation portion. But I think there's been a misunderstanding somewhere, as the majority of local boards, as we can see from the feedback, said that the review shouldn't just be of local boards, that the governing body should also be reviewed, even though actually the scope was wide open. If you look through the feedback, it tends to be the local boards that are experiencing significant growth that want things to be looked at a local board level, especially their boundaries, which is why I'm concerned that if we keep pushing this out, we'll compound growing democratic and representation problems. I just want to read out some examples of local board feedback that we've received. Henderson Massey does not support a reorganisation of Auckland Council's local boards as proposed by the report, but requests a review of Auckland Council's local boards together with ward boundaries and governing body representation arrangements to ensure they remain fit for purpose in the future. Upper Harbour Local Board do not support progressing with any local board reorganisation or changes to local board arrangements in isolation from an independent comprehensive review of Auckland Council's governance structure in its entirety, including all local boards, governing body, as reviewing local boards alone risks entrenching existing governance shortcomings. Kaipatiki Local Board. The Kaipatiki Local Board supports a reorganisation, however, this should incorporate Auckland Council's governance structure in its entirety, including all local boards and governing body. We believe that reviewing local boards alone risks entrenching existing governance shortcomings. Faux Local Board oppose the proposal to progress local board reorganisation, but also request that if a review is required, that it should be of Auckland Council's entire governance structure. Devonport Takapuna request the review includes a full investigation of the full Auckland Council shared governance model, including both the governing body and the 21 local boards, as well as decision-making power and budgets. So it does seem to me that there's desire for a review, but just not only the local boards. And actually, that is what we were suggesting originally. Now, some local boards have also put forward specific issues in the areas that are to do with growth. So we have the area of Drury is having problems. Whitford and Beachlands is having problems. Old Flatbush, Milldale and Ara Hills. These are all identified in the report. And then I'll also draw your attention to the LGC recommendations that we had last time, which included the Albany North Shore boundary, which I'm most familiar with, and it is in breach of the 10% representation rule that we need to deal with at some point. There's also been a lot of concern raised, and as Councillor Watson mentioned, that Auckland structure doesn't resolve the intent of the Royal Commission on Auckland Governance. Mr Mayor, today I won't be putting forward an amendment, even though I strongly believe that we should be proceeding with this, because I know there isn't the support for it at this time due to the upcoming transport reforms, even though it is possible for Auckland Council to do more than one thing at a time. But I will be voting against B and urge that anyone who believes that we should be tackling these overdue democratic and representation issues to also vote against B. Thank you.
Councillor Turner, please.
All right, thank you, Mr Mayor. The two speakers before me summed it all up. I just concerned the overall picture. When beginning of the last term, we were talking about fixing Auckland, we were talking about empowering the local boards, giving them procurement and upscaling them. So that was a review of the local boards, I understood, with a amalgamation of some of those local boards. And then you add to things like that the fact that local boards are going to become road controlling authorities. We really don't need 21 road and control authorities. 12 would be much better. So I agree with everything everyone said beforehand. I think this is slowing a process that I thought we'd got into at the beginning of last term. So I do realise that we're in amongst so much change. Everyone's sinking under change. So I will be voting for it, but against B. Thank you.
Councillor Ferry, please.
Kia ora. Just a couple of points to make. Firstly, I would actually support a broader review. However, that's not the decision before us. The decision before us is direction on progressing a local board reorganisation for the 2028 elections. A broader review is unfortunately something that's not on the table for a variety of reasons, including, as has been alluded to, the upcoming transport reform. So it's not a good time to be changing our governance structure when we're about to change who decides what in a way that will have a massive impact on people's workloads and the role. The other thing to note is that the process from last term did start down, and a number of us were obviously on the Joint Governance Working Party at that time, but also a number of new councillors took part in that process wearing local board hats too. We did start down the track of trying to do a representation review and a reorganisation for local boards simultaneously, and this governing body, or the previous governing body, but the governing body nonetheless, decided not to progress with the reorganisation. As we worked through it, we discovered there was no simple model that had consensus or even a plurality of agreement to take forward on local board amalgamations. It's actually really hard to get this right. And I think the local board feedback that points out that we need a review of governance arrangements as a whole is correct. That's not what we have to vote on today, but also actually the resources involved in doing that are significant. We've talked about the idea that the Local Government Commission could perhaps do that work in the future. Perhaps that's where it needs to sit, because the other thing that it would require to get to something similar to what the Royal Commission recommended, for example, would probably be one of the options, is actually some law changes. So some of the change that I'm hearing people speak to is not actually something that could be delivered through the reorganisation process anyway, because it would require law changes. The Local Government Commission have said they don't have capacity. They're dealing with a whole lot of regional government changes. I think it is something that we should probably raise through the Auckland Deal conversations, that it's potentially timely to review this stuff, and I'm not afraid of that. But this can't do it. Voting against this makes no difference. And I do think we need to be careful about how some of that local board feedback is being represented. My understanding, for example, is that Henderson Massey's concern was actually primarily their long-standing advocacy for single wards, where instead of having two ward councillors for some wards and one for others, they actually wanted to see one member for each ward, which would actually mean we had more wards. So I think we just need to be a little bit mindful here. If local boards give feedback for a range of reasons, seeking a review is not the same as saying they wanted to progress a local board reorganisation, and I think the majority were very clear they don't want to do that at this time. Kia ora.
Thank you for that, Councillor.
Apologies for my late arrival, Your Worship, but look, I'll be supporting this, and I'd make the point to those members of local boards who are concerned that the option here for reform or a reorganisation would be limited only to the boards and not to the governing body, and perhaps that we need to address the wards and the governor and the councillors too, is to remind that we actually have gone through regular reviews of our ward boundaries, our representation arrangements for the governing body. Actually, the outliers are the boards. So if there is a concern that the scope isn't wide enough, we've been through this process from a governing body perspective several times previously. And Councillor Ferry is right. We actually have tried to address this previously. And actually, some of the strongest resistance to this actually came from the boards themselves. So I am not comfortable having just gone through a representation arrangement prior to the last election to go through a representation arrangement for the 2028 election. It happens every 2 cycles, as I understand it, and perhaps the approach that needs to happen is that the next time there is a representation review for the governing body and the wards, that the local boards are part of that, and we try and organise that at the same time. I'm not sure that I'm necessarily confident about the Local Government Commission driving that work, to be honest. And I would imagine that the moment that happens, there'll be a whole lot of Aucklanders, and in particular local board members, who'll be saying, why aren't we controlling that? Anyway, Your Worship, I'm happy to vote these recommendations. Thank you.
Good points. Thank you very much, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's interesting, the Auckland Council and Auckland councillors in the past have always been willing to review and reorganise local boards, or at least consider that, but never has never shown the same willingness to, if you like, look in the mirror and consider whether the Auckland Council itself needs to be reviewed. It's easier to review and reorganise it seems, but never to review or reorganise me, or rather ourselves. Now, this is an interesting exercise. We've gone out to the local boards and in terms of reorganisation or review, reorganisation essentially, 4 actually support it. 4 of the local boards, 4 are absolutely against it, but the overwhelming majority are actually for a local board reorganisation, but, and very sensibly, only in conjunction with a reorganisation, or at least review, of the rest of the council, which makes a lot of sense. In the corporate world, you know, big mergers of companies always go through a 10-year review to see how it all worked out. You know, did it achieve the goals that were set down for it at the beginning? And the people of Auckland were promised a lot of things about the new so-called super city in terms of cost efficiencies in particular. And clearly, Auckland Council has failed to meet those goals quite significantly. And so I guess when the local boards say, yeah, you can have a go at reorganising us, but it's got to include you. And suddenly everyone's gone cold on that idea. But I'm sure the local boards who are close to their communities are aware of public feeling. And in the end, it's what the public believe or want that should be the determining factor. And I don't think they've really been asked. But in terms of the surveys we undertake, and I congratulate the Chief Executive for keeping these going, even though the results are not particularly flattering for the council, it's very important data. So the quality of life and citizens' insight monitor surveys indicate that trust in Auckland local government, public trust, is at 27%. Confidence that the council makes decisions in the interests of the public, it's 29%. And belief that the public has any influence over decision making, 34%. And those figures, interestingly enough, straddle the metric that Councillor Watson talked about, that only 29.4% of qualified voters bothered to cast a vote in Auckland at the last local body elections, way below virtually anywhere else in the country. So therefore, that's a signal that when the local boards, two-thirds of them say to us, reorganise the whole show, reorganise the whole council, and we'll certainly support that. We'll support our own reorganisation, but we need to reorganise the whole council. Of course, the problem for the council, apart from political willingness, is that there isn't really a pathway to do that. But of course, we are in the hands of the government of the day when it comes to this, of course. But we talk to the government about all sorts of things. Auckland deals, big deal. But when it comes to things that really count, here is what we should be doing. We should be talking, I think Councillor Ferry mentioned this, that we should be talking to the government by saying, hang on, it's 15 years, guys, and you'll put a rates cap on us for your own good reasons. We have cost problems for our own good reasons. Obviously, it's not working as promised, and therefore, let's work together on a reorganisation of the whole Auckland Council. It's time that we did that, and just because there's not an easy laid out manual to go through this, we need to lead the way, because given the signals coming from the public and the abysmal turnout at the last election, people didn't vote with their feet, they voted with their recycling bins, unfortunately. And that's something that we should take very seriously indeed. So in some ways, the whole exercise is a waste of money and it's taking us nowhere. But what we need to take out of it is let's start listening to we asked the local boards a question and they gave us an intelligent answer. We need to listen to that and act on it. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Bartley, please.
Thank you. I'm always worried when we talk about smaller numbers, cutting the numbers of local board representation or local elected representatives numbers, because it means that it favours those with the resources to compete for those votes, and it means a dilution of voices that are traditionally underrepresented at this table and our local board tables. So I'm not keen to support this. I don't get people come up to me in the street and say, can you do a reorganisation review or a local board representation review? What they are saying is, can you sort out the traffic? Can you make sure we don't flood? Can you make sure we still have a maunga and a river so that our kids can fish out of that river? So I think we have bigger fish to fry, and I agree with the local boards that say, well, what is actually broken? Yeah, and I will support this because I don't want to see us
Thank
waste
you very much,
time
councillor
on a
Bartley.
reorganisation.
Councillor Baker, please.
Yeah, sorry, I won't take long, but, and apologies for being late. I'll be supporting this. I do agree with Mike, though, that at some stage we do actually need to look at the whole thing, and it's, we had this discussion in the local board when I was on it, gave feedback that we should actually be reducing numbers and et cetera in local boards and all sorts of things. We were the only ones, and I think that was the time when turkeys don't vote for Christmas became a really popular saying. And so I agree with Mike that at some stage, but Auckland's very dynamic at the moment. I don't think now is the time to be doing any of those because things are changing so quickly, and if you take down south and Daniel and Matt's ward and my ward, there's people coming and going and all over the place, so now is not the time. And the reason I was late is I was sitting there talking to the local board about transport reforms, and Shane and I are doing every single local board, and they are confused about that enough. We don't need to be chucking something else into the mix. So I think we should just leave this, but we always need to have the opportunity and the willingness to look at representation.
Okay, thank you for that. My experience during the last election is this is not a burning platform. I don't remember anybody raising that. They raised exactly what Councillor Bartley said. Fix the traffic, fix the water, stop the flooding, blah, blah, blah. The local board's role will be strengthened through the transport reform. And if we were talking about a public issue about reorganisation politically, we have right at the moment a raging bonfire in Wellington because the public of New Zealand do not select the leader of New Zealand. So if anything needs to be reorganised, it should be down there first up. We did give local boards more decision rights and budget responsibility for community services and infrastructure. They're all busy, and we've got better things to do to spend the money this year than doing this, so I'll definitely be supporting that. And I will be moving this, and it's seconded by Councillor Henderson.
Division.
And a division's been called.
A division's been called. Yeah, there we are. Look at that. Someone's beating you to it there, Alf. It must be a South Auckland thing. Righto, we're going to have a division on this, and we'll see if we can do better than 15-6 this time.
Thank you, councillors. We are going to do this electronically via Resolve. You are voting on the 3 court clauses in total as you see them on the screen, and we will start the vote now.
Usual story, recording against at the end if you want to vote against one of them, or you want it, is it just a vote of everything?
Yes, no, that's correct. You can record your opposition to one of the clauses if you need to.
I'm going to record against B, because the other ones are just received.
Record against B?
Yeah.
How do I do this? I'll just ask you to record my opposition to B, wasn't it?
Consider changing your password, please.
So Duncan against B, please. Mike, do you want to record yours against B? Do you want to record yours against B?
Yeah, record against B, please, Sandra. So what do I press here? President voting?
Yes, you are. But you will have missed the vote now. And so the blue one.
Not voting?
Yep, so no.
Oh, whoop.
That one?
Yeah.
And that one.
Save.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Oh, it's gone.
It's gone again.
Okay, so
Record my vote
Against B, you did it.
against B.
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 Yeah, but what about the whole
Yeah, so vote for it, but record against B.
Okay,
Yes.
cool. Thank you.
We like the local boards.
All right, thank you, councillors. We have every vote recorded. So the motion is carried, 19 votes to 2, and we have some recorded opposition to clause B. Councillor Burns, did you want to change your vote? Thank you.
Right, thanks for that little bit of excitement. We're going to go on to transport reform, which we